Hello and welcome to Opening Bars. It's hard to believe, but this song is now well over 40 years old and remains one of the most popular and recognizable and emotionally moving compositions of all time. It is widely reported that Paul wrote the first lines as he gazed over the East River from his New York apartment. When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all. He especially liked how the melody to the second couplet echoed one of his favorite Bach chorales. He was also very partial at the time to an album by the Southern gospel group the Swan Silvertones, particularly "O Mary, Don't You Weep," and also the Eversley Brothers' Songs Our Daddy Taught Us. Paul really wanted a gospel feel for this new song, so he enlisted session pianist Larry Knechtel to work on an arrangement, which worked out brilliantly. In fact, Larry Knechtel shared in the Best Arrangement Accompanying Vocalist Award for this song in the 1970 Grammy year. And as we all know, Paul gave this song to Art to sing, a decision that changed the course of musical history. Let's look at the harmonies first. Here we are using the standard treble and bass clefs, with the most common time signature 4/4. There are 3 flats, so we would expect a tonality of E flat major or C minor. The opening measure is routine enough, and we'll assume E flat major as the overarching tonality, as it ends this fragment and also begins it on the E flat chord in second inversion, arpeggiated. Then it moves to the dominant B flat in root position before settling on A flat in measure 2. Oddly, because it doesn't start on the root of the tonic, this 4 chord feels, to me, like a point of arrival, and as we already know, the subdominant 4 is an important focal point in popular and gospel music. Here we also see some typical gospel-like chord movement. The B flat chord passing over the A flat, which then chromatically rises in octaves with that lovely A diminished 7 chord above to arrive at E flat in second inversion again. This time, however, it uses the C as an accented suspension tone on beat 1 before resolving on beat 2. This feels like an unresolved secondary dominant. I personally hear a C here with the F and D flat being passing tones to arrive more fully at the C7, which now one would suspect would be another secondary dominant going to F minor. But we are deceived again and go back to the 4 chord instead. That is so very clever. To close this section of the opening bars, this 4 chord is then reiterated in the minor in the second half of that 4th measure, and offers us a plagal 4/1 cadence, which is rather hymn-like. I suppose Paul could have just ended the intro right there, pausing on a minor 4 chord and waiting for Art's vocals to enter. But here again, he invokes this style of music to vamp a 1 and 4 on a tonic pedal tone. And we can sometimes hear in live recordings that this section is vamped a couple of times to give the vocalist a chance to start singing amid all of the applause. Let's look at the rhythmic aspect of these opening bars. Let's start with the left hand, as it's the easiest, primarily octaves, and an open interval of a 5th in the 4th measure on this page. Here again, we can construct a little exercise to practice this technique. Let's play arpeggiated chords in the left hand, starting on an E flat, which is the tonic, B flat, the dominant, and even though we don't see it here, the A flat subdominant chord. Let's do that now accompanied by a click track. Many pop songs that we have seen in this series are founded on triads, three-note chords, but here in the right hand, we have a fuller texture of four-note chords, played in a broken format to sustain a steady pulse of eighth notes. Let's create another exercise now, playing the essential outline as here, but playing them in broken format on the 3 scale degrees as before. You can stop this video if you like and work on these little exercises, or incorporate them into your practice routines. They are very common practice in pop music, and will serve you well to give them some attention. There is a special technique we can look at here. Look at the notation on the very first measure. There's a vertical wavy line beside that E flat first inversion chord. This is an instruction to the performer to separate the playing of the notes like this. Now, some texts call this arpeggiation, but I tend to reserve that term for a more rhythmically precise performance, and one that is usually written out in full, like the opening riff in the left hand. So I tend to call this a rolled chord instead. To me, it suits the performance attribute where all the notes are separated, but must remain with the overall context of beat 1. Now, I suppose you could also then write them as 16th notes, and we do want to have each note evenly represented, but I'll add a little wrinkle. You will notice in my played example that I actually start the roll before the left-hand octave actually comes in. So, in a sense, it's almost like a grace note arpeggio. Practice this for yourself, alternating fixed chords, broken arpeggiated chords, and rolled chords. Try to get a real feel for the difference between them. So, if we are to discuss a stylistic genre, what makes this piece so gospel-like? Well, I'd personally say that it is highly structured in a strophic, hymn-like way, employs a textured homophony in the way the opening chords are presented, has a vamp section, that's that 1 and 4 over a tonic pedal point, that reminds me very much of the tune "Oh Happy Day." It switches between major and minor presentations of the same chord with little or no preparation, and it uses solid foundational octaves that utilize rising walking bass patterns, often chromatic, with sequential passing chords moving in the opposite direction in the right hand above. Of course, this style is most associated with service and worship, a relationship that was not lost on Paul Simon, and his wish to invoke the profound, almost sacred nature of the lyrics. And finally, If you watch YouTube live performances of this song by both Simon and Garfunkel together and as solo performers, you will hear the opening bars played very differently from the studio album version. This is, after all, a gospel-inspired piece, so it would be very natural to put your own spin on the arrangement. It can be anything you like, but bear in mind, you really want to keep the heart and soul of the piece intact, while still giving a fresh interpretation with your own personality. I suppose if Paul Simon had asked me to join him in the studio, perhaps I would have played this. I hope you enjoyed your lesson today. Remember, don't just play notes. Make music. Until next time, thanks for listening.